As a constitutional law attorney, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
It is Tuesday, January 30th, and the Biden administration does not want to escalate tensions in the Middle East despite military personnel getting killed in terror attacks. Joe Biden is truly the face of weakness. This, according to the National Review. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said Monday morning that the White House is not looking to escalate the conflict in the Middle East, even as Republicans urge the administration to retaliate against Iran directly after the country's proxies killed 3 American troops and wounded 25 others in a drone strike on U.S. forces in Jordan on Sunday. Kirby said during an appearance on NBC's Today, "We are not looking for a war with Iran." They may still get one, though. Obviously, these attacks keep coming. He said, "We are looking at the options." Biden did not elaborate on his plans for retaliation, and Republicans are now pressing him to deliver a swift response to the drone attack. Maybe act like the commander-in-chief. So tensions are also escalating on the Texas border, and there is a coalition of 20 red states that are looking to stand with Texas. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is calling for constitutional reforms to require a balanced federal budget, congressional term limits, equal laws for the public and Congress, and a line item veto. He tweeted this yesterday, that it is time for D.C. to work for the American people. I love it. This is what Governor DeSantis had to say.
Well, we just rolled out some reforms under Article 5 of the Constitution. Reality is Washington is not going to reform itself. We can hope to elect better people, but the incentives are not good. And they're not good to be able to produce good results. So we are working with the Florida legislature to certify under Article 5 of the Constitution a series of constitutional amendments. 1, for term limits for members of Congress. 2, a balanced budget requirement for the federal government. 3, a line item veto for the president. And 4, an amendment that says Congress shall make no law respecting the citizens of the United States that does not also apply to members of Congress themselves. The Founding Fathers never envisioned that we'd have a separate ruling class that would govern itself separate and apart from the people. They never envisioned that they would be adding this type of debt. And they really never envisioned that people would want to be in Congress for 30, 40 years, the way things have developed. So these amendments are all designed to use our power as individual states under Article 5 of the Constitution to force change in Washington and to take power away from the entrenched D.C. elites and return it to its rightful owners, which is we, the American people.
I love it. And joining me now is Jeremy Redfern, who is Governor Ron DeSantis' press secretary. So, Jeremy, this seems like such a simple solution, and one that the founder specifically embedded in Article 5 to allow the states to propose amendments to the Constitution through Article 5, ignoring Congress. So what's the overall goal here?
So I think the goal here is to take the power out of D.C. and give it back to the American people. As Ron DeSantis kind of talked about this yesterday, which is there's really 4 main problems that are happening in D.C. right now, which is you have politicians that have been in Congress for 2, 3, 4 decades, and they don't really have any plans to leave anytime soon. They'll stay there as long as possible. You have absolutely no balance. We haven't had a balanced budget since 2001. So we're talking 23 years ago is the last time the United States had a balanced budget. This proposal would require Congress to give the American people a balanced budget. You also have Congress not applying laws to themselves that they would apply to the American people. I think one of the more recent examples that, a lot of people probably remember is Congress was exempt from some of the requirements of Obamacare. And then you have omnibus bills that are basically the norm that come out of D.C. You no longer have, just single appropriations bills for single topics or just a few topics. You have at the end of the year, and this goes across both Democrats and Republicans. They just pack everything into one bill and pass it all at once, thousands of pages long. And you know that most members of Congress, other than maybe Thomas Massie and a few others, are actually going to be reading those bills. They just sign them and they pass the buck, and they give the administration more power. So the idea of these proposals is to rein in Congress, to rein in D.C., and also establish a line on a veto for the president. Because even if a president's party is the same as the Congress in power at the moment, there's still things that can be done to help rein in some of that spending that, the president might not agree with at that point in time. That's something that we have in Florida. It empowers the governor to make sure we're not overspending, and that's something that, he believes we should have at the federal level as well.
Yeah, and all of these things, Jeremy, are things that I think the federal government is not going to do themselves, and Congress, even though we currently have a Republican majority, we don't have a conservative coalition of Republicans, and we've seen that with the real difficulties that former Speaker Kevin McCarthy had with the coalition, and then also now current Speaker Mike Johnson has in terms of getting Republicans to agree on anything and actually use their majority effectively. But over the last even 50 and 60 years in Congress, with all of these different sort of runaway issues and omnibus bills and not balancing the budget and the increasing federal debt. I mean, all of these things that you just mentioned, no Congress has done anything about this. And so it's up to the states with their sovereignty and their ability under Article 5 to actually propose these types of reforms. And I'm very grateful to see Governor DeSantis leading the way on that. So there are already petitions under the Convention of States project, and Florida is one of the states that has passed that petition that includes a balanced budget. And so Governor DeSantis has already endorsed that project. So why not continue with that petition, because it's closer to the finish line of getting that 2/3 majority of the states needed to actually call the state legislatures together and those delegates. Why not go after those petitions instead of drafting this new one?
So I believe the petitions are probably still in line with what that project's trying to do. Basically, what is happening here is we're adding 2 extra proposals as well. So we have the balanced budget, and then I forget the other project that they're trying to do, which is also the what's the second one?
They have balanced budget and term limits and judicial reform.
Yes.
Are there 3?
So basically, what we are trying to do here is make sure that our language is in line with the other states that have already passed a lot of these reforms, and that's for that balanced budget and the term limits. What we're also doing is adding 2 on top of that. So we have the requirement for Congress to abide by the same laws, and then also the line item veto. So it's adding extra requirements on top of it and trying to, Ron DeSantis is going to lead the way to make sure that we can get these other 2 important topics, things that he's been fighting for since he was in Congress, in 2013, try to get these across the finish line as well.
And that makes sense in terms of adding some of the subject matter. And I was speaking with Mark Meckler last night, who is the founder of the Convention of States Project, and he's going to join later on in the program to respond to this as well. But in terms of the overall subject matter, so is this something that the governor has spoken with other red state governors and other majority leaders in other state legislatures that are on board with trying to get this particular language and petition passed in other states so that we can get to that 2/3 threshold in the Constitution?
Yeah, that's something that, going forward, we're definitely going to be doing from here. He's going to definitely use his position as governor to try to champion these in other states. We're going to work on getting them across the finish line here in Florida, and I think we have a great shot at doing that. And then once we get them across the finish line, governor will be out there trying to get them across the finish line in other states.
And so in terms of getting this across the finish line in Florida, since this is part of Article 5, this petition would necessarily need to have that broader coalition of 2/3 of the states. If this passed in Florida, it wouldn't necessarily have any immediate effect on, for example, term limits just on Florida members of Congress. Yeah, so here in Florida, we already have these limits in our state constitution. So that's kind of like the idea is to limit the power of D.C. So it's still going to take other states to join
to get these across the finish line. And that's something we're definitely going to need going forward. That's something Governor DeSantis is going to lead on, and we're definitely going to see that. We think, at least with the balanced budget amendment, there's a lot of states that already are online with that, and they definitely want to pass it. So that's probably a little easier. And then term limits is something that not as many states have passed yet, but we think there's a good chance. I mean, term limits is something that if you go ask anybody, whether they're Democrat, Republican, black, white, any demographic, that's something that most people find is common sense. And we think that there's broad support for it. Now, we just need to get those state legislatures on board with what the people already believe is something is a common sense proposal. So that's something that we're going to lead on here from Florida. That's something, as we've seen, Governor DeSantis has had no problem with leading on issues across the country, whether it was in 2020 and 2021 for COVID, and then pushing back on vaccine mandates. The governor has been able to persuade people that what he's doing is the right thing. And it might not be popular at the time, but these are things that are already popular that people have been talking about for years. We just need to get the rest of the states on board to get these across the finish line so we can have the ability to reign in D.C. A lot of people complain about D.C. a lot, and this is something the governor talked about yesterday, which is, we complain about Washington a lot, but let's actually do something to restrain Washington for once.
Yeah, and absolutely. I'm speaking with Jeremy Redfern, who is the press secretary for Governor Ron DeSantis here in my now home state of the great state of Florida. And one of the things that I truly respect about Governor DeSantis is that he is such a constitutionalist and understands not only the state constitution, but the federal constitution, that he has not yielded state sovereignty in any way to D.C. He continues to lead in Florida, and he's now supporting Texas as well by saying no, there is an issue on the border, and clearly we're not just going to sit back as states and allow the federal government to allow this invasion without doing something about it and beyond complaining about it. And in just the last about 2 minutes I have with you, Jeremy Redfern, let's talk about Texas. And so Florida has actually supported Texas long before this became kind of a bigger national issue over the last couple of weeks, with the attention focused on Governor Greg Abbott's response. You've been working with Governor DeSantis in office for a while. And so what has Florida actually done to support Texas that listeners may not know about that other red states should follow?
So to understand the problem with the border, we have to go back to 2021. And in Joe Biden's first 100 days as president, he signed an executive order that stopped deportations for his first 100 days, which is just the incentives are all wrong here. If you want to stop the problem at the border, you don't stop the programs in place, the policies in place that would prevent people from coming across the border. So basically what Joe Biden has done is he's invited what is happening at the border, and he's done nothing to stop it. So in 2021, Governor Abbott was basically asking the other states for assistance because the federal government was unwilling to do so. So 2021, shortly after Joe Biden took office, Governor DeSantis was there. He stepped up and he provided resources to Texas from the very beginning, from when they first asked for it. And we've been doing that ever since. That's something that he supported ever since, this invasion started. When you have 8 to 9 million people coming across the border at once, that is absolutely an invasion. And the idea that it is not is absurd. So Governor DeSantis has been there the entire way. He's also signed an executive order to assist the Coast Guard down in, South Florida with boats and aircraft to watch for any, basically help them interdict anybody trying to come across the border in South Florida as well. So this is definitely a national problem. Every state at this point is a border state, and Ron DeSantis has been there every step of the way to try to combat these policies from the federal government. And he's going to continue to do so. He's going to continue to provide that support.
Excellent. Well, Jeremy Redfern, thank you so much for the work that you're doing in Florida. So much respect for you, for my great governor, and thank you for the work that you do on behalf of Floridians and also all of America. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Welcome back. We are continuing to talk about the need to protect state sovereignty, to rein in the federal government, and to call for reforms. And I'm very grateful that this topic is getting national attention because of Governor DeSantis' leadership. But this is actually an issue that many of us have been calling for years, particularly none other than my good friend Mark Meckler, who is the founder of the Convention of States Project. You can find that at conventionofstates.com. And Mark joins me now. So Mark, you were listening to Governor DeSantis' press secretary in the last segment, and the question that I had for him that I would love for you to respond to is why a separate new petition instead of Governor DeSantis helping advance the petition that has been the Convention of States Project that was already passed in Florida back actually 10 years ago. It was passed April 21st of 2014 that already addresses a lot of these very important reforms.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jenna. I don't know. I don't think we got really an adequate answer to that. I'm a little bit confused. To be fair, Governor DeSantis has long been a supporter of the Convention of States Project. Florida was actually the second state to pass our resolution. Our resolution contains the vast majority of the things he says he's looking for: term limits, balanced budget amendment, things like that. We also have a broader application that says that we're going to limit the scope, power, and jurisdiction of the federal government, meaning we can get rid of things like the Department of Education or the Department of Energy, Health and Human Services, things that we believe are a gross overreach of the federal government. And we know that Ron DeSantis is a true federalist and believes in those things. So I'm a little bit confused by kind of what they're doing right now. They say that they're passing, he wants to pass a BBA. We have a balanced budget amendment portion of our application, only it's broader, and it does things like limits the federal government's ability to impose unfunded mandates, which I think is imperative. It allows us to impose tax caps and spending caps, which a pure BBA doesn't. He talked about term limits. I agree with him. Everybody in America wants term limits. Unfortunately, the term limits application now running in the Florida legislature only allows them to limit the terms of Congress, which empowers the deep state. Something you're very aware of, the power and the evil nature of today's deep state. It allows us to limit the terms of bureaucrats and staffers, and the term limits amendment they're now proposing doesn't do that. So I remain confused as to why confuse the issue, why water it down, and why do things that are less powerful than what they've already done.
And I think that's a great question, and one that I hope the governor's office will follow up on. And you mentioned, Mark Meckler, that the petition for the Convention of States Project that's now been passed in 19 states. And again, you can go to conventionofstates.com. You can look at that map to see where the application has passed, that resolution has passed, where there's active legislation this year. And then in North Carolina, it's passed in one chamber, obviously needs the next one. But in terms of what this petition can do that has already passed in Florida to get rid of the deep state bureaucracy, I want to expand on that a little bit, because that is one of the things that especially Trump supporters and I think conservatives overall over the last 10 years or so, especially in the last few years as well, have seen how much the swamp has just gotten wider and deeper. And one of the biggest things that they have said that exit polls have shown for why voters want to give Donald Trump another chance is because they want him to drain the swamp. And the executive office of the president can do some, but this petition that COS is proposing would really expand the ability of to actually accomplish that. And so expand on that a little bit more of what that proposal contains and why that is so critical to actually draining the swamp.
Yeah, so the third part of our application says that in the convention, it can be discussed limiting the scope, power, and jurisdiction of the federal government. This goes straight to the heart of the deep state. And while Donald Trump went after the deep state, and I have no doubt if he's elected, he'll do it again, and I appreciate that, almost everything that a president can do individually as the executive can be reversed in the next administration if it's a Democrat, liberal, progressive administration. We've seen that right now with Joe Biden, all the things he's done. I mean, look at what happened at the border. Joe Biden used his pen and opened the border immediately, got rid of the Remain in Mexico policy. We are actually, for example, able to give the states concurrent jurisdiction over the federal borders. In other words, to say that states have absolutely the power to enforce border laws and immigration laws. That argument is taking place now in the courts. We can end that argument forever and give states like Texas the ability to enforce the borders. We can do away with particular agencies, specifically, in my opinion, things like the EPA, and the Department of Energy, the Department of Health and Human Services, maybe even Homeland Security at this point. We need to do away and remove those authorities from the federal government. We can do those things specifically. And then I would say these crossover, we need term limits on the bureaucrats themselves. The term limits being proposed in the Florida legislature right now, term limits Congress. I understand that sentiment. It's a good sentiment. But the problem is if you limit the terms of state or federal legislators, in terms of members of the House of Representatives and members of the Senate, and you don't do the same for staffers and bureaucrats, you make the staffers and bureaucrats much more powerful. And unfortunately, the term limits amendment being proposed right now by the state of Florida and being supported by the governor would do just that. It would empower bureaucrats and staffers.
And this is why it's so important to know what the legislation actually contains and for listeners to understand why the Article 5 Convention of States has been previously endorsed by Governor DeSantis. I think he's still supportive of that. Why I've long endorsed this. A lot of our fellow constitutional law experts like Mark Levin, Michael Ferris, and others have supported for a long time the Convention of States project. And one of the things that I know is controversial broadly that I would love you to respond to, Mark Meckler, is that a lot of people try to avoid kind of saying Convention of States because people confuse this term with Constitutional Convention. And there is this fear that I think is improperly placed just because of the misunderstanding of the term, that this could be a runaway convention. And if we call the delegates together from the states at a convention, then they could do something like repeal the First and Second Amendment or, some of these things and basically, reopen the entire scope of the U.S. Constitution for discussion.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a couple of ways to slice that. I'll do it quickly, legally first. I'm a lawyer, you're a lawyer, so we know about this kind of stuff. We talk about this kind of stuff. Constitutional Convention is what's called plenipotentiary. It means all-powerful. They can do anything they want. This is not that. This is an Article 5 convention for proposing amendments. It has to operate under the United States Constitution as it exists today. It's limited by whatever the states say they want to talk about. When you hear conservatives, and sometimes we do, talk about the idea of a runaway convention, they are espousing the ideas of the radical left in America. That idea was really first proposed by Chief Justice Warren Burger, the Chief Justice that gave us Roe versus Wade. Unfortunately, it was listened to by Phyllis Schlafly, one of the great women in American history, who had become friends with Warren Burger. She spread that around. This idea of a runaway convention is something that's espoused by literally George Soros and all of his organizations, Common Cause, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, La Raza, MoveOn.org. All these organizations, including Planned Parenthood, talk about the idea of a runaway convention. So when you hear people on the right saying that, They're actually using language created by the left to keep people on the right from looking at this idea and using this Article 5 that's in the Constitution and designed to preserve our constitutional form of government.
And this is so important, Mark Meckler, to understand, as you just described, the difference between having all power to change the Constitution versus power under or provided by and derived from the constitutional language itself. And that's why this type of proposal is under Article 5. This is the exact same as a parallel example of what Governor Abbott is doing right now, of saying, well, the Supreme Court got it wrong. Their power is under the U.S. Constitution, where my power to protect the state from invasion is literally given by the Constitution. And so a court cannot override that particular text. I mean, this is why it's so important for all citizens, not just lawyers, not just people who go and argue in court or in policy, to understand the text of the Constitution and what it actually says. And I don't believe that there is any way that we get to some of these proposals for amendments unless we do it through the states and their authority under Article 5, because Congress is the only other way that we can propose amendments to the Constitution. The federal government is never going to restrain itself. This is why the founders specifically gave states that power, like they ensured and protected state sovereignty.
Yeah, and this is really important. The states themselves limit the scope of the convention by passing applications that are limited to whatever they say. In our case, talking about term limits for federal officials, so that's the Congress itself, but also staffers and bureaucrats and the judiciary. By the way, we could also pass an amendment limiting the Supreme Court to 9. I know a lot of people are concerned about that. It also allows for a balanced budget amendment, but more broadly allows for tax caps, spending caps, anything that would fiscally restrain the federal government, and then finally anything that would limit the scope, power, and jurisdiction of the federal government. And all the states, 19 so far that have passed this, 15 to go, are using the same language so that the convention is limited to that. And I'll give you a specific example. You mentioned the Second Amendment. That's an important one to my family. My son's a Marine. My mom was law enforcement. We like our guns. We like the Second Amendment. And people say we're going to lose it. Well, right now you have 27 states with constitutional carry, meaning no permit required, 24 states where you can carry your handgun into a state legislature, 14 states where you can actually carry a loaded long gun like your AR into the legislature and watch the proceedings there. So you have all these states that are very strongly pro-Second Amendment. The idea that you could get 38 states or three-quarters of states to ratify an amendment doing away with the Second Amendment is ridiculous, and yet I hear opponents say that all the time.
Yeah, the math just isn't there. And really, a lot of things in politics comes down to math, just like the Electoral College delegate counts, things like primaries, and also things like getting amendments passed or even legislation passed. It comes down to math. And so the math, you're right, Mark Meckler, just isn't there. But the math on the other side for actually calling for the convention and the delegates from the states to get together to propose amendments that then would go to three-fourths of the states. Three-fourths of the states would have to ratify those proposals for the amendments to become part of the Constitution. This is why having the same subject matter matters. And this is the question that I asked Jeremy Redfern and I think is a question still for the governor's office, because right now there are over, I think, 400 live petitions trying to call for a convention of the states under Article 5, but we haven't called one. Well, why? They don't agree on the subject matter. And so why would it make sense to propose a separate and different petition and basically start the process all over instead of at least moving forward with the Convention of States that has kind of this broader ability to do exactly what Governor DeSantis is suggesting on balanced budget, term limits for the deep state as well, and judicial reform when it's already passed in 19 states. I mean, the math, 19 is better than 1.
Yeah, and it's confusing to me. You know, I'll give you an example right now. They're proposing term limits. There are 3 states that propose term limits in the way that the governor is promoting right now and Jeremy Redfern was promoting. That means 31 states to go. Well, we have 15 states to go. proposing a broader form of term limits, which is a healthier, safer form of term limits. I would argue the form that they're proposing is actually dangerous for the republic. It empowers the bureaucrats and the staffers. So I'm not sure why. And I can tell you, look, we have over 5 million people in support of what we're doing across the country. And people are confused right now about what the governor is doing. They love the governor. And they appreciate everything the governor's done in Florida. I think we can say unequivocally Ron DeSantis is the best governor in my lifetime. And I'm an older guy. I'm 62 years old. So to me, that's really saying something. I think he was a powerful presidential candidate and has a great national future for him. But on this issue, folks are confused. We've got 5 million people out there wondering, well, why is he doing this?
Yeah, and I think, too, people are confused, and I even get listeners to this program. And I previously had Mark Levin, I've had Mike Ferris, I've had you on to talk about the Convention of States Project as a whole, and I think there's a lot of confusion just around what Article 5 actually says, what it means, what it can and also cannot do. And so that kind of basic education is something that we also need to focus on in terms of combating some of these false fears, I would term it that way, from people who genuinely have some concerns, and I think their questions are definitely appropriate, but they need to listen to the legal answers and to the response from experts on this issue, from people like you and Mark Levin, who say this is exactly what the founders provided so that we can restrain the federal government. So in just the last 2 minutes I have with you, Mark Meckler, where can people who maybe aren't quite convinced listening to this, because I get listeners, and I'm sure that there are going to be people who email me today that say, well, we're very concerned about this, and, no, we can't crack open the Constitution. Where can people go to find out more information and genuinely take in that civics education on what Article 5 says and does not say?
Yeah, they can go to conventionofstates.com. If they're in support, they can sign the petition, get involved. If they're just interested in learning and they want to see both sides of this debate, they can go to our FAQs. I think this is really important. Be a skeptic. I think that's a great idea. But then be open to real information. And I would say, Jenna, listen to you. I mean, you've been on this issue for a long time. You were early in and early on. You're a constitutional lawyer. Listen to Mark Levin. Listen to Ben Shapiro. Listen to Professor Robbie George at Princeton. I would say one of the greatest conservative legal scholars alive. Mike Ferris, a constitutional lawyer. Listen to people who spent their lives on this subject matter. Professor Rob Nadelson, the greatest living constitutional lawyer on the subject of Article 5. And then make your own decision. But you can do that at conventionofstates.com. Go to the FAQs. All the information you need is there.
Thanks so much, Mark Meckler. And you're right. I endorsed the Convention of States Project back in 2015, so it's been almost 10 years. It's the last chapter of my book, The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution. So I've been an advocate for a really long time, and I think now is the time to call for an Article 5 Convention of the States. As you know, my friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike found the world's best cotton. It is ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's Giza sheets come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. The Giza Dream Sheets come in a variety of sizes and colors. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets. You will also receive a set for as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use the promo code Jenna. There you will find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, which I have and I love, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and now even flannel sheets and so much more. We definitely need flannel sheets for as crazy as all of this weather has been lately. So go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code Jenna or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce, 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now.